Observation 1 is the resolutional analysis. A subpoint is the resolution. The United States federal government should significantly restrict or eliminate commercial flights from countries experiencing an Ebola outbreak. The B subpoint is that policy net benefit is the best criterion for the debate. It allows both teams access to predictable burdens and methods of refutation. The little c is that we do not represent the historical actions or ethics of the United States government. The PMC is our ethic. Observation 2 is the background. The argument here is that Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia are currently experiencing an Ebola outbreak. As a result, we encourage the plain text. The United States federal government, through executive action, will eliminate commercial flights originating from countries experiencing an Ebola outbreak. Observation 4 is insolvency. The first argument is that this flight ban is going to lift as soon as the Ebola outbreak ends in these countries. Because it is an active ban that is placed only upon countries that are experiencing an Ebola outbreak, it will respond to the crisis if the crisis moves to another country or if the crisis ends in a certain country. Thus, advantage 1. Ebola. Surprise. The A subpoint is the uniqueness. The first argument is that Ebola is spreading right now. The little a is that it's communicated by the coming into contact with bodily fluids of someone who is experiencing symptoms. The little b is that the first case hit the United States when a man in Dallas contracted Ebola. The second argument is that Ebola kills. The little a is that it's 70% lethal. The little b is that the man who contracted Ebola in the United States died as a result of Ebola a few days ago. The little c is that there's a 2 to 21 day incubation period, means that people on flights aren't necessarily showing symptoms when they have Ebola. The B subpoint is the link. The first argument is that we stop the flights. This is going to be key because the flight from Liberia to Costa Rica to Dallas is popular for individuals traveling from Africa to North America. This is the main transport route through 4 hubs. This leads to a dramatic increase in the risk of exposure of people in the United States. The second argument is that people do not fly or are not going to fly to the United States because they're likely attempting to take this route as an attempt to visit family or as a recreational trip, means that these individuals can just put this off until the travel ban is lifted. The C subpoint are the impacts. The first argument is that Ebola deaths are happening now. The little a is that thousands of people are dying as a result of Ebola. The little b is that this is an extremely painful form of death where individuals literally bleed to death through all of their orifices. The little c is that any risk of it spreading through the United States would be dramatically increased by the fact that there are large population hubs in the United States, means that it would be very easy for this to spread rapidly, but more importantly, when it's in international airports, the risk of it spreading through the airports and getting into other countries is very high. If someone coughs on their hands and then touches a doorknob, anyone who touches that doorknob is at risk of being contracting Ebola as a result of that. But the second impact scenario here is ruralism. The little a is that ruralism is a form of place-based discrimination that is not encompassed by classes of sexism or racism or any other theory. The little b is that healthcare policy is ignoring rural populations in the United States right now. The 7.9 million people are not recognized by federal policy as a result of their perceived political irrelevance. The little c is that they are the highest risk of dying as a result of disease spread because they have the lowest access to healthcare resources, means that these individuals on the periphery are most likely to die as a result of this. The little d is that the plan is a recognizance of their place-specific needs, that when we recognize their vulnerability to disease spread, we recognize the needs of individuals in rural areas and reorient ourselves to the rural populations. The little e is that ruralism is the logic of genocide, that we create populations that are not valued by the state, means that these individuals are necessarily the first that we justify dying as a result of their place and the result of their perceived irrelevance. Are you happy there, Corey?
Yeah.
Advantage 2, air industry. Advantage 2 is the air industry. The A subpoint is the uniqueness. The first argument is that the United States air industry is at risk right now. The little a is that durable goods sales decreased 18% over the last period because of a decrease in construction of planes. The little b is that the stock prices for airlines decreased 12% over September as a result of the Ebola scare, that people perceive the potential risk to the air industry right now as a direct result of the potential Ebola crisis and its ability to spread uniquely through airlines. The B subpoint is the link. The first argument is that the plan is going to pass and that we are going to ground all planes coming from Ebola crisis countries. The second argument is that passengers are going to be reassured and you're going to be more comfortable traveling, because when you're not fearing that you're going to be contracting Ebola from someone traveling from an Ebola crisis country, you're not going to be you're going to be more comfortable buying your plane ticket. You don't think you're going to get Ebola. The third argument is that as a result of the capability of passport tracking at the customs, we're going to know that individuals are originating from countries of travel that are in an Ebola crisis, means that we're going to be able to effectively check back for this. Yes, Mark?
Four is investor confidence.
The fourth argument is investor confidence, that this is going to reinsure investors and airlines that the proper measures are going to be taken that is going to absolve liability for the air industry, means that we're going to resolve the investor confidence issues that has led to the decrease in stock prices and the decrease in construction of new planes purchased by U.S. airlines. The C support of the impacts. The first argument is that China is poised to take over the U.S. air construction industry right now. The little a is that they are providing planes that are directly competing with Boeing and Lockheed Martin means that they are providing the services necessary to provide a direct replacement to the United States. However, the historical use of U.S. airlines has prevented this right now. The little b is that this is going to be key to the development of reliable military technology, that as soon as China has the ability to replace the United States as a result of the collapse of our airline industry, that they are going to be able to develop the reliability needed in their jet engines to have more effective military technology, which gives them the effective test bed that they need to develop their fourth generation fighters. The little c is that the United States is going to lose air superiority, which is particularly problematic for Taiwan, where the United States air superiority has given us the effective ability to check against Chinese aggression over the state of Taiwan, because China knows that they couldn't win an air battle against the United States because the F-22 Raptors are so good at blowing things up. Means that once China has more reliable air technology, they will feel that they have the ability to counterbalance the United States' influence in the region and take over Taiwan, which would lead to the degradation of rights for millions of individuals living on the island of Taiwan, and would necessarily lead to dramatic human rights violations, such as what happened in the inland China right now. The second... Sorry, did you want something else? The second scenario is the airline industry collapse. The little a is that this is going to lead to individuals losing out on jobs, that there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs that are relying upon the airline industry, whether directly within the airline industry or in support services provided to the airline industry. That collapse of this would necessarily force individuals into poverty, and that individuals in poverty are forced to make choices between doing things like buying food or paying for healthcare, that these individuals necessarily need to choose the way that they die, whether it be by starvation or as a result of their decreased health. The little b is that this is the construction of disposable populations that happens at the state level, that when these populations don't have access to the requisite utilities to be able to provide for their life into the future, they are constructed as a disposable population by the state and just seen as an acceptable loss, that it becomes part of the 0 point of our violence, that they are accepted as the acceptable losses within our system. The little c is that this leads to an increased probability of death for these individuals, not only as a result of the enactment of violence from the state, but also as a result of their choices leading to shorter lifespan for these individuals.
It'll be one off, particularly long, and then on to case.
When you say particularly long, like, do I need more than 5 sheets?
No, probably not. More than one. Yeah.
I've heard weird things.
So it's one check. So is it a critique piece written?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
it is. And then it'll be case in order. Yeah. The Rez analysis on top. Huh? The Rez analysis right after the case. Yeah. Rez analysis after the case.
So it's case starting from the top.
Or K and then case starting from top.
Cool, thank you. Thesis, the rhetoric of the Ebola outbreak reinforces the clinging paranoia of the black body and the affirmative reliance on, or reinforces the notion that that Western salvation is the first priority, and their logic justifies the structural adjustment of policy of the World Bank and the IMF that ensures this. Ensures that Africa is subordinated by or is objected from the development, and only the Afro frames our relationship towards Africa in a way that recognizes humanity of the other. The links is one, the diseased black body. The plan reinforces the fear and capability and capitalizes on the fear of the terrible disease that's indistinguishable, or now is indistinguishable from blackness, and disapproved by the plan who plans to within the crisis they decided to quarantine the entire population by closing off airports to them, or stopping flights into them. And there's no coincidence that the plan bans transport is from Africa. And then the plan acts as if the spread of diseases from the black to other body, white body, is equal to or equivalent to an apocalypse. Means that there's no concern for violence or death of the act. So this is a question of the spreading of the disease. 3, this establishes a sovereign power and the position of discriminatory power. So the state decides which bodies are valuable. The impact is 1. This creates cyclical poverty. The logic of the affirmative ensures that the investment in Africa is only a fleeting and opportunistic, so that it seeks to benefit the U.S. companies. So this ensures that companies in Africa are never become competitive in the international market to alleviate the poverty that's happening within their own continent, so they can't establish a good foothold Research has also stated that 1 year in poverty takes off about 7 years of your life, and research has also showed that 40% of Africans in poverty are developmentally inhibited, which means that they can't get proper or basic care for themselves. 2, disposable populations. The ability to determine value to life ensures that the state maintains a position that it can determine certain populations as valuable. So this is where this is where they allow extermination to happen. This is enacted in the plan. This allows the African body to languish and allow a greater decrease for Africans to compete globally. And 3, this turns cases ensures that the epidemic in Africa never receives proper forms of attention.
Attention.
Huh?
Never gets proper attention.
Yeah, it never gets to the top of our attention. So this allows development. It allows Ebola to develop into a superbug, which will make it impossible to kill, which basically kills everyone, causes extinction. You can classify their extinction impacts. onto the alternative, which is vote Neg to deny objectification of West Africa to refrain from symbolic construction of African continent. Wait till the end. Again, vote Neg to deny objectification of Western Africa to refrain from symbolic construction of African continent.
Can I get stats and copy?
Just say it again. Yeah, I'll just say it again, sorry about that.
Okay.
Vote Neg to deny objectification of West Africa to refrain symbolic construction of the African continent. You good?
The end, one more time, sorry.
Western Africa to refrain symbolic construction of African continent.
Thank you.
Solvency, the refusal to engage in objectification is crucial, and it's the only way to leave space for a meaning that is held by the affirmative or African body. So this allows Africa to be valuable. Two, the new symbolic construction is crucial because it allows new and dynamic interactions to take place between Africa and the rest of the world. So this solves the gap because it allows us to approach Ebola that's constructed through a constructive manner, and this also solves the case because there's an investment without reinforcing poverty. Onto the third solvency point, which is the role of the ballot, is to endorse a team with the best ethical orientation to the world. Beyond its fake, ethics are real. They're an actual thing that happen, or that are real. 5, the perm preempts. The perm severs app, which makes it a moving target. So that means that the neg can get no ground, which is bad for education and fairness, or it doesn't sever, or it doesn't sever, it doesn't solve. On to advantage 1, which is actually go to advantage 2.
Resolutional analysis.
Oh, resolutional analysis. Okay. So.
Net beneficial orientation is bad because of what the disposable population.
Oh, no, but
fewer than die.
net beneficial policy is bad. Actually, they say this thing about it being net beneficial, but this creates disposable populations or allows for disposable populations to happen because they're only looking at what is a better alternative, and they're not like
Only looking at numbers.
yeah, they're only looking at numbers. This is bad.
It creates like a violation of the black and brown body because it's very fewer of them die by not doing anything than the potential for white bodies to die.
So it creates a reevaluation of the black and brown body because this makes them as disposable, and so this doesn't happen with white bodies.
They say that they don't represent the historization of this. They do because the entirety of their acts form on what they
Oh,
are.
so they say that they don't represent the actions of the government, but their entire arguments are based off of
like a culture.
Off of a culture.
Black bodies are less valuable.
So yeah, they're based off of a culture that says that black bodies are disposable. On to their second advantage, which is air flights. So they have this entire thing about in their impact saying that China is supposed to take up any air, but they don't have any link scenario saying that this is what's going to happen. It's not well warranted. So you can say that their impacts don't happen because there's no scenario leading up to how China is going to be taking up air and creating a better military technology, so they don't get their extinction or deprivation of rights from that. And then
They say China will take over military operations. That won't actually happen. They're going to develop their military independent of whether or not they have an air service industry.
Okay, so they said this thing about how Chinese military is going to be developed through the air by becoming more powerful in the air. But this is military technology development is going to happen independent of this. So this isn't actually going to happen.
They say that the U.S. will lose air superiority, which is bad for Taiwan. This is not.
Oh yeah, they said that the U.S. is going to lose air superiority because they're air superiority, which is bad for Taiwan because we can't counterbalance China. This isn't going to happen because the air flights are independent of military development.
Also, military hawks in the Senate ensure that funding will never get cut in the military.
Also, military hawks show that there won't be any cuts to military development. They don't get their impacts.
They say airline collapse. Airlines are still in this position of way of travel, which means that they will not collapse.
Okay, they said that air collapse is bad because airplanes are the most efficient way to travel, but clearly this means that they won't collapse because airplanes are most efficient, which means that we need them the most, so it won't collapse.
Yours is going to be case on top.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, it's going to be case on top. Specifically the advantages. It's going to go to advantage 1, then advantage 2. Then it's going to go to the alternative and alternative solvency. Then we are going to go to the links. Then to the affirmative framework arguments. So our resolutional analysis.
Okay.
And then the critiques of impact. Alright? And I will make sure, I've flowed each of these arguments in separate sheets, so I'll make sure to sign those for
I'm sorry, did you say government advantages stuff, then
yeah, so it's our
res?
advantage 1, our advantage 2, and then the alternative and alternative solvency, and then the critiques links, the affirmatives resolutional analysis framework, and then the critiques of impact. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
The only argument they make on advantage 1 is that all of our argumentation is based on culture, saying that the black body doesn't matter. This is not our analysis. Our analysis is that there is systemic death that is happening, and the risk of an outbreak would be incredibly bad. You can look at the status quo that we are currently sending 4,000 troops from the United States to fight the Ebola crisis in a crisis. Our argumentation is that if an outbreak were to occur, they would necessitate that we would try to take an isolationist approach. That if we don't try to resolve, if we don't prevent an outbreak from happening, then it means that we are going to look inward. That we would say the black body doesn't matter at all. Necessarily that this is the problem. That the affirmative must happen in order for us to focus on the current outbreak that is happening. It means that only the affirmative is able to resolve this. But also they concede the entirety of the rest of the advantage. It says that the risk of an outbreak within the United States would be systemically high, and this would be especially worse because of the fact that we have high population centers and this will spread globally. All this argumentation goes conceded, which means you can extend it. But this is simply what I want you to look to is the ruralism arguments. That ruralism is a form of place-based discrimination that affects especially racial populations, that affects the black body more than any other population. If you look at the fact that a lot of these individuals are pushed to the periphery, necessarily means that they are the most at risk, and only the affirmative is able to resolve this. It means that the affirmative resolves the internal link to the criticism. Good? Yep. Advantage 2. They concede the top half of the story, which is great for us, which means you can extend the uniqueness arguments and say that the airline industry is on the brink, that we are able to resolve this. This means that all of your internal link defense about Chinese military you can extend because we don't need this impact story. They concede the second impact story about how an airline industry would lead to the loss of thousands to hundreds of thousands of jobs, and that this would lead to systemic poverty. You can look to the fact that these impacts go completely conceded. The only argument they make is that this won't collapse because of the fact that the airline is very critical, but you can look to our uniqueness arguments that say that stocks are decreasing, the airline purchases are decreasing, a one flipped out argument does not resolve the internal link arguments, which means you can extend the poverty impact, which are going to be uniquely key on the critique, because you can look to the fact that poverty tends to be racialized. Individuals that are forced into poverty are the black body that you discussed, which means the affirmative is necessary to prevent even further violence against these individuals that are at the periphery.
The U.S. airline is particularly on the brink because they move their ticketing services to off-board companies like Expedia, means that their margins are tight.
Yeah, you can list the fact that the affirmative is especially key because the fact that the United States has moved, that airline industries have moved their ticketing to off-board industries such as Expedia, which means that the margins are incredibly slim, which means that only the affirmative that reinstills confidence within the airline industry is able to resolve the inevitable collapse. Good? Yep. The alternative? First argument is going to be permutation do both. Do the plan and deny the objectification of West Africa to reframe symbolic construction of the African continent. You can look at the fact first, they do not provide an independent reason as to why voting negative is key. They only say that we need to do this, not necessarily that the affirmative should be rejected. It independently means that we can do both. The second argument is going to be the permutation that benefit the Trojan horse, that our current that it's just isolating isolating all individuals that have this current understanding means that you force them to the periphery. You only force to allow them to reinstill their understanding because they were trying to construct them as bad. Our argument is that the permutation is necessary in order to be able to allow for a better understanding. It allows for an approach that says that the way that you are understanding this is wrong. This is not necessarily that you are wrong, but rather that we need to break down this approach. Necessarily means that we are able to get inside these systems that lead to the objectification that allows us to break them down. It means that the permutation result is best. But additionally, the third argument is going to be on the alternative solvency itself. That the alternative seeds the political sphere. That they are trying to reconstruct this understanding, but they give up the political understanding. They try to say that we need to reframe, but they don't say it, but they don't make any type of argumentation about how this is going to actually lead to any resolution. This means that this means a couple of things. The first point is that this is a disadvantage to the case because all these individuals that have this understanding are those that are the political elites, those that have all the money and the guns. Necessarily means that you're never able to break down this understanding. It means that they will try to isolate and destroy your movement and try to destroy your understanding. It means that this leads to further violence. Additionally, second, this is a terminal of solvency to the criticism because the fact that that you are not able to break down the way that these political systems function means that you are not able to resolve these internal problems. But third, this also functions as net benefit to the permutation. That by working through the plan types, by working through political structures, we are able to better break down this understanding and standing into the future and actually make changes to our policies. It means that the permutation functions best. But additionally, you can look on the solvency page. You can look at the fact there's no solvency for this criticism. They don't make an argumentation about how this reframing is going to occur. They just say that we have to deny it. Just rejecting this does not necessarily lead to the effects that you want. You can look at the fact that if you do reject this reframing, we would likely return to the way that we've treated Africa in the past, which is through things like colonialism, that would try to exert direct control over these different populations and over these different governments. The current structures, while may not be best, are better than the ways that we have treated African populations in the past. Means that there's a terminal no solvency to the alternative. But additionally, there's another no solvency argument that there's no space outside of the structures that you claim. You look at that the political structures are entirely built into this understanding. There's no space outside of this understanding for criticism. It means that just rejection is not going to resolve this. Good?
Yeah.
On the links. A couple of arguments. The first argument is going to be a link turn that an outbreak would lead to even worse discrimination against the black body. You can look to the fact that if an outbreak were to occur within the United States, it would necessitate a violent United States response against the African population, and that we would necessarily blame the black body. We would blame Africa for spreading their disease to the United States. Our argumentation is that by preventing an outbreak in the first place, we are able to prevent these constructions that are inherently problematic, and we are better able to focus our approach in order to be able to resolve the disease from spreading in the first place. Yeah.
Non-gentrified cities have the highest population density. This means that these individuals are going to be most likely to be at risk. This is most often the black body.
Okay. You can look at this is on realism, yeah. Okay. Additionally, the next argument we turn that non-gentrified cities tend to have the highest population of the black body, and that these would necessarily be the individuals that would be forced to the periphery and affected worse. Means that only the plans that they also have the fewest healthcare resources. They are the most likely to contract this disease. Only by preventing the spread in the first place are we able to resolve this. But additionally, the next argument is going to be a link turn that we work in conjunction with Africa and the policies that they have been implementing. Look at the fact that African nations have been enforcing travel bans in order to prevent the spread of Ebola in the first place. Means that the affirmative is the best internal link in order to be able to resolve this. But good.
They're the ones who are quarantining people.
They are the ones that are quarantining based on Ebola. This is an external risk, not a United States direct construction against African populations. It means that only the affirmative that's able to resolve the spread in the first place is able to resolve this on our framework, the affirmative framework. The first argument they make is that a net beneficial approach to create disposable populations. The first argument is that the alternative works within the same framework. They don't provide any external mechanism by which you should understand this, and all their impacts are based on numbers calculation. Means that they function within this too. Additionally, second, you can weigh things like the effects to rights and the value of life within that beneficial framework. That you should be able to weigh the different effects of different policies through a net beneficial framework, and any other framework is not effective. Additionally, you can look at the fact that that a policymaker approach is best. That you should be working through this policy understanding. That's all the argumentation that we make through the alternative. But additionally, this means that we get to weigh the affirmative because God doesn't have imagination. This is our the rhetorical ethic, and that we should be able to weigh that against the criticism.
Okay, the order is going to go A with alt on top, links, impacts, Rez analysis, and then Ebola, and then air industry. So 1 second.
So to make sure I got that right, it's the alternative, then the links, then the impacts, then the affirmative resolutional analysis, then advantage 1 and advantage 2.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't want to crouch over my desk, and I have to stand there.
You could maybe pull out that overhead projector that looks like
Yeah,
no
that would
one's
work.
to move.
Okay, cool. Alright. Yeah. Okay. First on the alternative, they say you can't do both. They say there's no independent reason why you can't do both. We have articulated the reason that you cannot say that you are rejecting the symbolic construction of the African continent, but while you are still isolating the African continent, literally isolating and forcing it to stay there because you are afraid of becoming diseased. You literally cannot separate your reasons for wanting to separate them from saying like that you will reframe your orientation to them when there's no actual action associated with it. They say that the permit is necessary for a better understanding of the challenge. We say that your construction of your plan text was created in a world with a bad methodology, and only after accepting our methodology can you reframe your argument. It's not enough to say that you are taking the influence of the alternative into your argument. You have to entirely create a new argument. Also, this is severance because they sever out of the immediacy of the plan by switching their advocacy in the MG. This creates a moving target. This also severs out of a full rejection of the symbolic construction of the African continent. This is unfair because it creates a moving target, which means that you get 20 minutes of prep and moves the entirety of our speech, which means that we have to reevaluate how we can reorient to our alternative. This is bad for fairness in education because then we have it destroys the quality of the debate. They say also this is cognitive dissonance. So the active rejection is fundamentally different than the Aff plan text. So the plan text was originally considered bad methodology. This is also rejection. The third argument is that rejection is key because the permit allows for a co-optation of making justification that creates the opportunity to continually justify bad actions against the black body. They have no solvency with the perm because they will continually slap this band-aid of acknowledging the alt onto the problem without actually fully accepting the problem. Okay, on thesis. No, on links. They say their link turns the outbreak leads to worse discrimination within the black body. However, they ignore the fact that there's literally like infinitesimally small risk of Ebola spreading to the United States. That man in Dallas was the only one who unknowingly brought back Ebola, and that was because he didn't take proper precautions as a healthcare worker. Also, let's see. They say that the black body would be infected in the U.S. This is inherently untrue and also assumes that the black body is inherently associated with disease rather than those who would actually be most in contact with people who are Ebola, who are typically fewer minorities and the more privileged people who become medical healthcare professionals. Also, they say that African nations are enforcing the travel ban now. That doesn't necessarily divorce them from the notion that the African body is associated with disease, and it does not divorce them from the idea that they are pathologizing the black body because it comes from a source of not wanting to infect the white body in the U.S. Okay. Also, they ignore links about sovereign power with discrimination. On impacts, there's literally no arguments on the impacts, which means that you can flow through all of those and evaluate them as who has best or ethical orientation, not, okay. They say that, okay, we say that it will lead to cyclical poverty because only when we prevent healthcare workers from going to Africa by stopping flights there and coming from there, we actually create cyclical poverty because we only focus on a crisis when it arises instead of preventative care. Like if we had actually gone in and like given them like the tools to originally stop an outbreak from occurring, this wouldn't have happened. But instead we only focus on them after they have already suffered immensely. Also, it's in my partner's analysis that it'll lead to that one-year poverty significantly decreases your life expectancy. Also, extend that the state determines valuable bodies and allows the African body to be disposable. This was entirely unconceded. Also, you can weigh this. We solve for their case when we reorient ourselves towards the black body, because when we reorient ourselves towards the African continent, we no longer pathologize the black body within the U.S., which probably solves all of your arguments. It says that rural populations, which are primarily minorities, would be affected. Okay, also, they say Turner's case. Oh no, we say Turner's case because the African body never gets the attention that it needs, and that this leads to a worse outbreak of Ebola because we're focusing entirely on white bodies to where the outbreak is worse. When we take can you hear those? Yep. Okay. On resolution analysis, they say that they don't create disposable population. We're saying that they're uniquely tying into our case because they are creating a world where you only evaluate the numbers, and you say that well, as long as they are dying, but the potential for the white body to die more is worse than the potential for the black body to die. They say that they don't represent a historicization of like orientation towards the black body. This is inherently untrue because they grew up in a culture that has a bad orientation towards the black body, which means that your policy is grounded in a bad methodology. And also, they say that a policy approach is best, but that is only true in a world where you've already accepted the act and reframed the entirety of your policy. Also, they okay, move on to Ebola. Okay, on uniqueness. They say that Ebola has a high propensity to okay, actually they don't say that, they don't isolate any like risk. There's no number to the risk that says that like there's like a 70% chance of risk of there being an outbreak in the US, which means that they just say that it's highly infectious. It's not even highly contagious. The propensity to come into contact with these bodily fluids is very low when you actually wear those Tyvek spacesuits, which means that the propensity for them to actually solve is very, very low by stopping flights. The CDC chief says that it is an infinitesimally small risk of a global outbreak. Also, Tom Friedman, director of the U.S. CDC, says, and prevention says that the travel ban would not prevent the spread of disease because the spread of disease is happening in areas where they do not have the same control that over their medical resources that they do in the U.S. Also, Friedman says that it would make it worse because relief workers cannot get into these areas, which would actually increase the outbreak and the violence against the black body. Also, we say that this logic prioritizes the U.S. outbreak over stopping West African outbreaks. Is a paternalistic logic that says that the bodies are disposable. Americans only care about the potential for it to spread to the U.S. because they do not want it to infect the white body. Also, it denies individuality because they are seeing the entirety of the black body as not an individual. They isolated one specific case of one man in Dallas that we know all about, but there have been no names given about any of the Ebola victims in West Africa. Also, onto links. Nope. Okay, the entirety of their advantage does not solve. Flights do not, they don't stop the risk of exposure. Mostly because people coming back will be healthcare workers who already have to take precautions. And assuming that people who are traveling, who are just out of West Africa, who haven't been exposed to the Ebola virus, is just a further pathologization of the black body. Onto the air industry. They say that they have a brain cover. They ignore our analysis that literally the air industry cannot collapse. It's like a car industry. When the car industry stocks plummeted, we bailed them out because it was a necessary part of our industry. They say that passengers will be less frightened and they'll increase how comfortable they are. This is directly linked to the case by saying that their irrational fear is a legitimization of how we should treat the black body. Also, they say that investor confidence should be valued over us getting like healthcare workers to West Africa. On their impacts, they say that China will take over. This is inherently untrue because China's military industry is independent of their domestic industry.
Rez discussion, what's it called?
Resolutional analysis.
Resolutional analysis, and then case in order. Alright, so we were waiting here because we had the best ethical orientation you can look to how we will be solving for poverty, disposable populations, and how, yeah, we'll be stopping all the discrimination, and then look to how they have left. Their perm doesn't exist. Okay, I'm just going to move on.
Their perm shoot.
Or perm does not function. There we go. All right. Okay, so on to the alternative. We've already stated in our, we've already given you perm preempts saying that
There is no independent reason why you cannot do both.
oh yeah, there's no independent reason why you cannot do both. We've already given reasons about why the perm is bad and how this only makes it so that the negation doesn't have any, or how you basically taken away fairness and education from the negation because you basically mooted off 20 minutes of our prep time. So bad for fairness. Also,
Even if you do buy that it sees the political, it is still like their valid, or their plaintiffs was considered bad.
so even if you buy that their plan seats of political, you still have to look to how their plan was made through this flawed methodology.
Which means that their orientation and how they see the political is wrong.
So their orientation about how we see the political is wrong today.
They also do
Point of order.
contest orientation.
The argument that the way that our methodology
Yeah.
informs that, okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Go.
New argument, don't worry about it, just move on.
Yeah. Okay, and then
Extended rejection is key.
oh yeah, extend that rejection is key, and yeah, we need to reject this entire construction by the affirmative that you're objectifying Western Africa, and that if we should be doing what the Neg is doing, which is to reframe symbolic construction of the African continent. I'm gonna move on. Okay. Onto the links. Again, they keep saying this thing about how there will be a larger outbreak if we don't close off the airports through countries that already are infected. But they ignore that there's an infinitely small risk that Ebola will spread. So extend across all my partners' arguments about how Ebola won't be spreading as quickly, and that this assumes that the black body is going to be spreading all these things. So this only creates further racism, which creates more disposable populations by racism and discrimination to the black body. They don't solve for any of their arguments in their advantage, or in their case saying that they solve for that because they still have this flawed methodology. They also say this argument about how Africa has already stated that they've already closed off their airports, but this is divorce themselves from the argument that
This is separate from a white orientation towards the black body.
this is separate from a white orientation towards the black body, and also they've left all of our impacts unanswered, so you can extend across all of our impacts and how doing the plan will only increase the global poverty and how this creates a global populations, how it turns case.
You should weigh these impacts higher than any sort of economic.
Yeah, you should weigh these impacts over any other economic impacts because,
It's more ethical to value life.
oh yeah, because it's more ethical to value life over money. Okay. Onto the resolutional analysis again.
Just move on.
Yeah, okay. Onto advantage one. There's no risk that Ebola is going to be spreading. It's not as contagious, and there's a very low chance of getting infected by it. So cross-supply all,
They don't actually solve for anything.
so they don't actually solve for anything in their Ebola,
All they do is reinforce pathologization of the black body.
so all they do is reinforce pathologization of the black body. Yeah, and then onto their air industry. Again, air industry is not tied with military technology development, so they don't get this either.
I'll have an overview on top, followed by the alternative sheet, the links, and then the affirmative case in order. That's going to include our framework and then advantage one and advantage two.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time?
Absolutely. Overview on top, the alternative sheet, or wherever you float the perm debate.
Yeah.
The links, the framework, the affirmative framework, or resolution analysis, and then advantage 1 and advantage 2. Everyone ready? It's going to be an easy ballot for Nevada CN today when my opponents are conceding the no solvency arguments on the alternative. The permutation is the only thing that's going to be able to resolve this. Moreover, when the affirmative has internal links to the critique impacts coming out of the PMC, only the affirmative team is going to be able to resolve the critique impacts and has the cleanest critique impact scenario to be able to resolve this, even if we're not winning on the permutation. The affirmative is going to win because we resolve the issues of disposable populations and of systemic violence. Onto the alternative sheet. Couple of arguments that I want to respond to here. The first argument is that they say that we're still isolating the African continent. The first argument is that we're not isolating them. We're isolating any country that has Ebola. That we even specify out of the PMC that if this spreads to another country, that we're going to impose a travel ban against that country as well. We don't say that this is necessarily going to stay in Africa. If there was a European nation that this spread to, we would also impose a travel ban against that. But the second argument here is that we only isolate 3 countries, not the African continent, as this story coming out of the L&C and out of the block means that we're not actually engaging in the scenario that you're trying to link us to. It means that we're not isolating the African continent, we're only exclusively isolating countries that are experiencing Ebola. Sorry, Cord, did you have something?
Just bring it back then.
Okay. The next argument that they go for is that we're only able to resolve, we only get this reform after the negative reads this, and that there is, we're severing from the uniqueness of the plan text and moving the LOC. These are their severance arguments. We're not severing because we're doing all of both advocacies. We don't sever out of anything coming out of the PMC. Moreover, we tell you out of the PMC that we need to resolve issues of both disposable populations and, what's their second impact scenario? Cyclical poverty. These are 2 distinct stories coming out of the PMC. We're not severing out of anything. We're only embracing everything that has come into the round today. It means that this is a perfectly legitimate permutation, and there's no reason to reject it. But even if you were to reject it, the affirmative team is going to be able to win without it, but we'll talk about that on case. The next argument that they make is that this is going to lead to cognitive dissonance. They use this as a dissent of the permutation. My first response here is that cognitive dissonance is good because it causes people to reevaluate their argumentation and reorient themselves. That only by having conflicting ideas in your head are you ever going to appropriately evaluate them to where you can come to the point that you have strong feelings about something so that you can orient yourself against the objectification of individuals in Africa. The second argument that they make is that this is just reformism and that this just justifies bad actions. However, we're not generating any new harms. Moreover, we're resolving prior harms, means that this disadvantage of the permutation is going to go away. But the last argument that I want to make on this sheet is that you can extend Corey's third argument about ceding the political. You can extend all of this. They don't respond to the ceding of the political as the reason why you're never going to be preferring the alternative, because Corey says this is terminal no solvency to the alternative, but it also functions as a net benefit to the permutation is the reason why you're going to be preferring the permutation in the debate today, because only the permutation is going to be able to resolve this, because the permutation doesn't cede the political. It engages both the political structures through the government and engages our orientation to black bodies in Africa.
Yeah, Corey, this is also best because it allows us to reframe the political in the
Right, moreover, this allows us to reframe the political with the understanding that we need to stop to deny the objectification of West Africa, to reform our symbolic construction of the African continent. Happy there?
Yes.
Onto the link sheet. Only a few responses that I want here. In response to Corey's first link turn about how the outbreak is going to worsen discrimination, they only say that there is a tiny risk that this is going to spread to the United States. However, you can look to the CNN employee who also contracted Ebola but was kept in what? Do you remember what country he was in? I think it was Liberia. The CNN employee, he was a cameraman who contracted Ebola and was put in the quarantine that was enforced in that country, is probably a reason why any outbreak is going to lead to worse discrimination against the black body, because once white bodies get it, we're going to look to Africa as the source. So the best thing that we can do is to resolve this issue before it comes up. But the next argument that I want to respond to is where they say that we can't divorce ourselves from identifying Africa as the disease. The first argument is that we don't isolate Africa, we isolate these 3 countries specifically. This comes in the first 30 seconds of the PMC. The second argument is that ruralism is going to check back against whiteness, because we tell you that ruralism is frequently racialized problems as well. But the third argument is that Africa is the one who is categorizing people right now through disease, through their quarantine, that they're creating these problems, not the Aff, means that we're not going to be a link to this. Onto the framework. Corey, are you sure you want
Yeah, you don't really need anything.
Okay.
We get to weigh the affirmative.
We get to weigh the affirmative. We're going for the same impacts as them. Probably means that the framing doesn't matter. On Ebola, only one real argument that I want here. They say, first, that we're going to make it worse We're not going to make this worse because relief workers frequently travel on military planes or chartered planes through their organization is a reason why commercial airlines aren't going to be key to resolving this. But the next argument that they make is that we only care about the United States because there are white bodies here. However, this simply isn't true. There are all bodies in the United States. It's not about the white bodies in the United States. Moreover, we isolate non-white bodies coming out of the PMC is probably the reason why you're never going to be granting them this link and why the affirmative is going to be able to resolve the critique. You can extend the ruralism arguments at the bottom that we resolve disposable populations. When we're resolving most of critique impacts and these ruralism impacts, we have the most impacts resolved around the affirmative team wins the debate.
Okay?
Yeah.
So let's go, I'm just going to go through how I make my decision, which is actually pretty darn simple. You end up arguing each other's cases, which is, when you do that, you really put it in the right place, right? So if they're going to have a ruralism, this is a great argument. They do something very clever in their advantages, and you should watch out for it because it was very clever. They have two impact scenarios on each one. So on Ebola, they have two impact scenarios. One is a ruralism one, and then there was another one, which is
Just Ebola death.
genocide. Ebola deaths, yes. So they do Ebola deaths, we get stuck there, and then you have this ruralism that pulls out. Same thing on Advantage 2 on the air industry. You've got two of them. One of is the China poised to take over, and God knows we've heard that speech so many times in life. They were all like, oh yeah, nuke war, here we go. But the second scenario about the airline collapse, so it's going to be pretty common and a good idea that you have two impact scenarios. You have to go for both of those, right? It's problematic if you don't. So then really what you should do is run the critique against, run many of the critique arguments again against case where they have these ruralism arguments. So you're basically trying to solve for the same thing, and there's a huge amount of time spent off case on critique, which becomes it becomes important in the round, but becomes essentially a wash. Do I buy the permutation and say that or that they are marginalizing black bodies, or that they can sever out of it? I don't buy that they sever. I actually don't see that, and I see that you have the perm defense in there, and that's really good. I see that you have a response saying that they are severing. I did not understand how you were arguing that they were severing. I really didn't, and I couldn't see it on the flow. I didn't understand what you were saying, so I reject that. I reject that they sever. I accept that, and then they say they will take the whole thing. So since they don't, and that was your perm defense, I then have to weigh whether or not they can permute both of them. There's no time frame on the critique. Like, it doesn't have to be now. If we do this, then it will make everything so much worse that all of a sudden, we will marginalize black bodies and there's going to be a genocide. I mean, there is no time frame for that. I just know that it is bad. It exists now, and I know that case might make it worse, but case also is going to prevent death. So how do I get into that place? I do like this critique. I think it gets mired in the fact that they already took a lot of that ground. So since you couldn't fight that ground off, plus I like the argument though, and you did make it in your first speech. It is legitimate, but a little bit tricky to make it, oh wait, we're only doing a few countries and we move targets. I do find that sort of, but it's definitely a winning argument, and I kind of like games. So off of Rez, obviously that's, since the critique goes down, then I come to whether or not, or the critique kind of goes either direction, then I'm not going to give you extra solvency from the critique. Instead, I'm going to look at case. And since I have ground here, then I just look at case. Observation 1 goes away, the resolutional analysis. I don't even understand why we spend very much time on that. If you all just agree with it, just give it up, because it's not important. It doesn't factor in the debate, although I suppose it could have. The second advantage becomes something that we don't end up talking about terribly much, except that it is conceded, because the second impact scenario becomes conceded about the systemic, all links to military planes. I think you make a good argument, and then do not make it again, but you do make it as non-responded to, that there is a direct link between commercial airline production and military production. And there is a really good link. So sever those. Make sure that they're separate. Like, say, in China, it isn't this way. If it is in the United States, it isn't this way in China. I could have bought that argument. And then we go to Ebola. Of course, now I have enough that, right, so there's two things. I have to say that I end up believing throughout the debate that we do have this ruralism problem. It's tied to the same sort of conceptual otherization of black bodies or bodies of color that we have. I actually would have very much liked to have seen that a little bit more fleshed out, like who we are actually talking about. I buy the argument, and I think it's a very good one the ladies are making, that when we talk about these groups and we're just saying numbers, that's not effective. There's not a good argument. And so when you are going to do that in future, I would say, you know, these groups are what we're talking about. These are the people. This is where they live, so I have examples. And of course, my mind immediately goes to reservations, but make it clear to me so that I have some link to it. Everybody clear how I make my decision? Everybody happy? Very, very long RFD? Thank you very much for your names, so I can do speaker points. I enjoyed the round very much. We just ended up on each other's turf.
Yep. All right. Thank you.